I'm Erin O'Byrne and welcome to Everything EFL podcast. I'm passionate about serving teachers and I offer training for schools and institutions whose language teachers need a little refresher, a change of mindset and some super practical ideas to put into their classrooms straight away. There is no one-size-fits-all lesson plan, but you've got a friend and support system in me. I can help reduce your overwhelm, give you some teacher inspiration, and improve your work-life balance. How? With some solid advice, takeaways you can try out immediately, and some much-needed teacher love, because your well-being is important too. Are you ready to make small changes one step at a time and remember how amazing you are? Let's go! Hello, you gorgeous teacher. If you're one of my lovely regular listeners, welcome back. If you're brand new to Everything EFL podcast, you are most welcome and I hope you stick around. So today's episode is going to be one of my short and sweet ones, but it's inspired by a post that I read on Instagram. Now, I'm a big fan of Andre Headland. We actually did an episode 151, if you want to check that out. And it's all about how the brain learns, because he's very much about the brain. Now, this is essential if you're a teacher. Look, I'm not an expert, but I try and make it my business to at least find out a few different things. And following Andre is really, really useful because you just get a few snippets. And this is something we really have to think about. If you don't know the absolute basics of how the brain learns, how do you know that you're teaching effectively? And I hope this doesn't scaremonger any of you who haven't done any research. You know, I don't want you to feel bad or guilty about that. That's not my intention. But it's one of those things that we're not really taught. And we do have to do it ourselves. And I just think that you'll have a few reflections and light bulb moments when you do, because certain things you're doing will make perfect sense. Oh, yeah, I'm doing it the right. And maybe other things won't. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because it will make you think and reflect about what you're doing and how you could possibly change it. Anyway, I want to read from a post of Andre's that I think has a really interesting point. So he witnessed a teacher splitting her students into two groups. One group had brain breaks before going back to focused practice, and the result was that the ones who had a brain break performed way better, and when they had to draw something, their drawings were more complex and creative than the group who didn't get a brain break. They basically put in less effort and created simpler illustrations. So this is just one way, I think, of demonstrating that brain breaks can help students relax and replenish their energy and motivation levels. And I think also processing. I mean, think about the amount of stuff you cram into your students' brains in a 55-minute lesson or an hour-and-a-half lesson. Do you kind of stop between those activities just to chill for 30 seconds? You know, let's have a chill, let's reflect, let's process, let's have a chat, let's sit silently, whatever. And I think one of the problems is as well, we have a lesson plan that we want to stick to in a certain sense, and you know how I feel about that. So I suggest that when you're planning, you know, put a brain break in your planning, you know, 30 seconds between activities. That's all it has to be. Tell your students to relax, have a drink, look out the window, go to your happy place, not to your phone though. I think that's really important because a lot of my students reach for their phone and I have to say, this is a brain break, guys. You're not giving your brain a break when you're looking on Instagram or checking your bloody messages. You could even do a little meditation. Just get your students to close their eyes for 30 seconds, breathe, put on some nice music and take a nice deep breath and let's move on to the next activity. Don't get me wrong, I'm all for keeping the lesson pacey, but I think there's so much to be said for brain breaks and it's so simple. And again, you know, if you have 2, 3, 4 activities, 30 seconds brain break per activity, it's a couple of minutes you don't have to worry about when you're planning, and just add that in. And it's also good for you. You could also add a little reflection. You know, what did you learn? How do you feel? Stretch it into 2 or 3 minutes, you know, allowing your students to process what they've just done. So a brain break and a reflection could be a really nice combination. And we all know how important reflection is. Students and teachers are very worried about the outcome, the result, getting the task done, learning A, B, and C. But there has to be time to reflect on the process of learning as well. And you get to know your students more. It gives them a voice in the class, which is extremely empowering, even for adults. I mean, it's a no-brainer and a win-win, I think. I really don't have much more to say about this, but what I would say to you now is I'm going to challenge you. I'm going to challenge you in every lesson plan to bring those brain breaks in. What have you got to lose? Even if you're listening and thinking, I've got a 55-minute lesson. Yeah, make every minute count. You know, you're probably rushing from one thing to the next. Allow your students time to process what they've just learned. Give them time to reflect on what they've done. And I think that will be a lot more powerful. Less is more. And I really want to encourage you to think about how you craft your lesson plan instead of just filling it with task after task after task. You know, like Coco Chanel said, edit, you know, take out a task and make sure that the tasks you do count, bringing in brain breaks and reflections. I'd love to know what you think. Especially if you have a short lesson like 45 or 55 minutes. What's your initial reaction to what I'm saying? Okay, I'm going to leave it there. As usual, join my Breathe Easy Teacher newsletter community for weekly tips and advice and love, because, you know, where else are you going to get that from as a teacher? And it's going to contain a lot of new different stuff in the next couple of months, so I encourage you to join. Subscribe to this podcast if you haven't already. Just press that little subscribe button. Recommend me to a colleague. Share things on my social media. Talk me up in your staff room. Is your director or principal or head of department interested in your CPD? Why don't you ask them to book me for a CPD session? I've heard a lot of teachers say they get a lot out of my podcast and it really helps with their teaching. So imagine what I can do for you in an hour and a half. Anyway, until next time, have a peaceful week. Stay safe and look after yourself and share the love. Bye.